Beautiful faces. Why don't we move to item number 1 of the agenda, the call to order. I believe the secretary will do that for us.
Okay, we will establish a quorum, but with roll call. We'll start with Dr. Wong. Are you present?
Present.
Dr. McIntyre, present. Dr. Turetsky.
Present.
Ms. Brandvine.
Present.
Dr. Kawaguchi.
Here.
And Mr. Moridomi.
Present.
That makes 6 members of the board present. We have established a quorum with 6.
You did not call Maria Sperber.
Oh, I do apologize. Ms. Sperber.
Present.
Thank you. You were not on my written list from the agenda, so I was reading off the list. Again, I apologize. We're glad to have you here.
That makes 7 of us, though, just to let you know.
So we do have our quorum.
Great. Let's continue then. The next item is public comment for members of the public for items that are not on the agenda. Moderator, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak at this point? For those members of the public who want to speak on items on the agenda, you will have that opportunity to speak as we take up the agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. This is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. So if you are a member of the public and you would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment" in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. And if you do not see the Q&A panel, please click on the question mark within a square at the bottom middle of your screen. We'll give you a moment to access this feature.
Madam Moderator, how many members of the public do we have online at this point?
We have 4 right now,
Okay.
and none of them have expressed a desire for public comment at this time. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
All right, I will do that.
Our next item is convening into closed session. We are on item 3. So at this point, let's go into closed session. Moderator, would you do what you need to do to put us into closed session?
Thank you. So what will need to happen is I will be making our co-moderator the host of this meeting. We'll be leaving it open, and you, the board members, everyone that is going to that closed session will need to log into the closed session WebEx, and I need to open that first. So if you get there before I do and it's not available, that's why. It means I haven't opened it yet. So you should all have the link for that closed session.
Okay, this is something that Cherie would have sent to us?
Yes. Do we need to resend it? Because I can.
Hold on, let me, my agenda. All right, well, so we're at the strategic planning overview. Item 4, why don't I turn this over to our solid representatives to give us their introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. And co-moderator, if I can go ahead and have the next slide, that would be wonderful. Perfect. So my name is Tricia St. Clair. I am a strategic planner and facilitator with Solid Planning. And my co-facilitator today is
Shelley Jones, Planning Manager in Solid.
Thank you. So our role today is a neutral party. We are not representing staff. We're not representing licensees. We are a neutral party, and we are brought in to provide structure to the strategic planning process and to document the discussion. So later on today, as the meeting participants brainstorm objectives, you will see us typing and recording all that is going on. Next slide, please. So for those participating in the meeting, we just ask that you please minimize distractions. So if you have a cell phone, perhaps put it face down. Respect one another's contributions, because we will be brainstorming and want to make sure that we consider all ideas. Self-monitor for time limits. We don't have a specific time limit set upon the strategic planning process, but it is nestled amongst a board meeting, and there are other items to go over. So just be aware of how much time we're taking. And you may not always love an objective that has been written, but we ask that you ask yourself, can you live with it? And so that you can reach consensus. And then lastly, I want to let you know that we will fix grammar and typos later. Anytime you type in front of a group, especially quickly, grammar and typos sometimes occur, and we've had meetings where people are so fixated on fixing the grammar and typos that we kind of get lost in the weeds. So just know that we'll fix the typos and grammar at a later time. Next slide, please. So we do the strategic planning because the Department of Finance, when it audits a board, they look to make sure, does the board have a current strategic plan? Because of this, the Department of Consumer Affairs does require that each board has a current strategic plan. So solid planning is invited by the board to organize the efforts of the strategic plan and to help the board accomplish success. Next slide, please. So what we'll be looking at today is we'll be looking at the board's mission statement, their purpose, the values, how they go about achieving that purpose, the environmental analysis. So we're looking at the working environment inside the board, as well as what is going on outside the world that has an effect on the board. Where we're going, so the vision is their idea of what their perfect future would look like. And so when we craft objectives, we're asking ourselves, will this help us reach that future? How we get there, so the boards pick their goals, their areas of focus. And so today we'll be creating, or they will be creating, objectives for each of those goal areas. And there are 6 goal areas. Next slide, please. So this is the strategic planning process. And as you can see, today we're at the planning session. After today, we'll come drafting the strategic plan. So what we do today is not written in stone. Edits can still be made. And then the final draft will be voted upon by the board. Once that strategic plan is approved by the board, it'll be posted on the website and made public. And then the final stage is action planning, where we meet with the board and they take each of the objectives, break them down into steps, and those steps are assigned to staff. Next slide, please. So within the environmental analysis, what we did is a SWOT analysis. So we were looking at asking stakeholders about the strengths and weaknesses within the board and any opportunities and threats outside the board. So as you craft objectives, think about objectives that will help capitalize on the identified strengths and opportunities, and also objectives that help lessen any weaknesses or threats that were pointed out. Next slide, please. So your 2020 environmental scan was sent out to a listserv, the board's listserv, and you had 563 participants. And this shows they were asked to identify themselves. So this shows the breakdown of how they identify themselves. In addition, the board line staff was sent a survey, and 7 staff participated in that. And then finally, we had one-on-one phone interviews with the board and committee members, as well as board management. So all of these, all this information was compiled anonymously into your 2020 environmental scan. Next slide, please. So
I have a question on the last slide. You want me to wait on questions until you finish?
No, we can go back to it. Yeah.
So does everyone, so there's 563 participants and each one had 1 vote, is that right? So I mean, I find it interesting that there were only 3 consumers that voted in our scan and 544 licensees. So it's interesting that, you know, the voting would be somewhat skewed, particularly when it's external stakeholders, skewed toward licensees as opposed to consumers or members of the public. Is that a correct observation?
It is a correct observation. So when we send out, or when the board, we actually have the board send out the survey to the listserv. When we send that out, we're dependent on people to respond to it. So we don't have any control over who decides to respond. So this is just how it worked out.
Okay. And so if I were concerned about how consumers felt, what would be my best gauge of that? Or is it, you know, are you relying upon our kind of best guesstimate and the representatives of our public members and our professional members to kind of be the voices of the consumers?
So at this
I guess
time,
I'm asking you an impossible question. I'll shut up. I think I've already made my point or made my
okay,
observation. All right. Thank you.
sure. All right, so next slide, please. So I'm hoping participants in this meeting have had the opportunity to review the 2020 environmental scan report. And if anyone has any overall thoughts or areas that surprised you, in addition to what Mark just mentioned. And I will look for hands is what I'll do. And, you know, if you don't have anything to say at that time, that's fine too, but. All right, that's fine. So, so next slide, please. All right, so at this point, we're ready to take any public comment on the part that we've just discussed. So I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. All right, so that Q&A panel is open, and if anyone has a comment on what we've discussed so far, go ahead and type. I have a comment in the Q&A panel, and I will unmute people in the order that they make their request, and we are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, so I'm not seeing any public comment at this time, but we will be asking for public comment throughout this. So I will go ahead and close the Q&A feature for now. And if we can progress to, so now we're going to not reestablish, but just review the mission, vision, and values, because we like people to have that in mind as a foundation as they go forward crafting their objectives. Next slide, please.
Tricia, maybe I've lost my opportunity, but are we going to go over the pages, separate categories of the environmental scan, or was that the last item?
Do you mean the goal areas like licensing, examination? Are you talking about those?
Yes.
We will.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yep.
I'll hold my comments then, because some of those responses and percentages are interesting, but interesting in the particular topic area. So I'll wait till then. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so this is the mission statement of the board. So this is the board's purpose. It provides direction. I'll give you a moment to read it. And so going forward, do people want to edit anything? Are we good with this mission statement going forward? And I guess if you just want to show a hand, you're good going with this mission statement.
I have a question. It talks about through licensing, registration, education, etc. What is registration referring to? Are we talking about registration in the form of licensing? So what is registration? Can someone answer that?
And this is the moderator. I'll let board staff answer that one.
This is Natalia. I'm the interim lead licensing analyst. Specifically, the optician program is all registrations. So the registered spectacle lens dispenser and registered dispensing opticians are not considered licenses. They're registrations.
Okay.
So this is an app description.
Okay, thank you.
And then Ms. McIntyre, we should though say that this is a distinction that we have made within our materials. Under California state law, there is a distinction between licensing and registration. But because we do name them differently for the individual programs, we do differentiate registration and licensing. But underneath the statutes of California, there is no difference between the two.
Does that mean we don't need to have two separate terms?
I think we should have two separate terms, especially since opticians are not licensed. We need to, I guess, make it official, like how they're registered. So I think registration for the opticians, the registration applies just to the opticians, right?
I think that has been our intention in the wording, and that's the intention here because we do not have a state licensure exam for opticians. It had been our intention to differentiate that by calling it a registration, but it is important that we understand that underneath the law, and perhaps our legal counsel might want to make a comment that registration and license are viewed as the same thing under statutes.
I think it is a difference in terminology because the opticianry is not technically a license. I guess it's a registration. So I think it's appropriate to delineate here between the two.
I'm okay with the mission statement.
I'm fine with it. I just wanted to know what the difference was. And that was explained. Thank you.
There is the one thing that always bothers me. It's just a test, and I'm sure that Dr. McIntyre, you'll see this too as soon as I point it out. But there are different practices of optometry and opticianry, and so to use the singular practice sounds as if they are the same thing. It's a nitpicky, but at the same time, I think it's about our recognizing that opticianry is its own practice, it's its own profession to be dignified, respected, and regulated appropriately for consumer protection.
We could change practice to practices.
I like that.
Simple change.
Actually, I believe that it's correct grammatically right now. I think it does encompass to what you want it to encompass.
I kind of like separating out, when you say practice of optometry and opticianry, that sounds like one and the same. And I guess it's just semantics, but I do like the addition of the plural on practice, just to separate it out a little bit more.
I agree with Deborah.
This is the moderator, and just another thing to consider is and the regulation of optometry and opticianry. That way you don't have to worry about practice, should it be singular or plural. I'm just throwing that out there as well.
Can you say that again?
Sure. So, and regulation of optometry and opticianry. So getting rid of the practice and just have it be of optometry, the regulation of optometry and opticianry. Just throwing that out there because of the concern about practice versus practices.
That works too.
That's
What
good.
do the other members think? It shortens it a little bit.
Mr. President, I think that we have a hand raised. Perhaps we could take a bit of public comment on the mission statement.
Sure. I didn't see that. Moderator, can you open it up for public comment?
Sure, let me do that. All right, so we have the Q&A panel now available in your lower right-hand corner, so you can type, I would like to make a comment, and send it to all panelists, and then we'll unmute you. We also have instructions displayed on the screen. All right, so Adam Bentley would like to make public comment. So Adam, you've been unmuted.
Hello, everyone. So I think one thing that stands out to me is also that we register businesses as well. So I think taking out the word practice, or if we just said regulation of optometry and opticianry, because we do register businesses and we also register individuals. So I think there's the practice of opticianry and then there's the registered business. So I do like the taking out of practice and just the regulation of optometry and opticianry.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Any other public comments? Doesn't look like it. So, moderator, how do we proceed? I think, well, let me ask the board. I think based on that comment, I support the elimination of those 1, 2, 3 words. Do we have a sense from the rest of the board members as to whether that's a good idea or not? Or can we just move forward? All right. Hearing no objection, I think we have a rough consensus on the mission statement.
Okay, thank you. And I was going to have the co-moderator do this a little later, but I think I'll have her do this now. She needs to change how she shares this PowerPoint, so it will enable her to write on it, unless she can use the annotate feature to strike out. Oh, there you go. She's just going to change how she does that. And so, yeah, if you just want to make that change, perfect. Great. All right. And so the next portion, we'll move on to the vision statement. So the vision statement is your vision of a perfect future. So this is the future that you hope your objectives are moving towards. I'll give you a moment to look at that, and please let me know if you have any objections or want to change it or any questions. All right, so I'm not seeing any hands, so I think we're fair to move forward. And next we'll look at values. So these represent your board's core values, how they want the stakeholders to be treated, and the board has come up with definitions for these values as well. So again, please consider these values when you're crafting your objectives. And if anyone has a question or I'll look for hands. All right, so it looks like we're good to move forward from the values. And since so I was going to take comment after we looked at the mission, vision, values. So I'll quickly open up it again in case any of the public wanted to make a comment on the values or the vision statement. So I now have the Q&A open if any members of the public would like to make a comment. All right, so I'm not seeing any requests for public comment at this time, so I'll go ahead and close the Q&A feature. All right, so now we'll look at objectives. And before we get into objectives, we'll look at each objective name and the statement that describes it. So these goal areas were selected previously by the board, as well as the definition. So I just want to do a quick review of them, make sure everyone's happy with the name of the goal area as well as the definition that goes with it. So we'll start with licensing. So I'll give you a moment to read that and let me know if you have any questions.
To follow through with the comment that Dr. McIntyre and our executive officer, I believe, made, might be wrong in the responder of opticians are registered. Should this be licensing and registrations?
I would agree with that. In addition, at the very end, it needs to be more encompassing.
Okay.
So currently, we only talk about the practice of optometry. So maybe we need to remove the last. Well, so maybe we need to remove required to practice optometry
Okay.
and replace it potentially with certifications for optometry and opticianry in
Okay.
California.
So we'll get that typed out and you can let us know how it looks. And then an A after that I at the end, and then RY, I believe, opticianry, I believe. Oops. I think there's a perfect, I think. All right.
And to change the title, if we could, please.
And registrations.
Okay, so the title of the goal area would be licensing and registrations, or just registration? Okay. So does that look better? All right. So seeing no hands objecting, we'll move on to the next goal area and its definition. Thank you. So I'll give you a moment to look at this one. So please let us know if you would like to edit or change this statement.
The examination process will, I don't know where the committee is in this. Is it definitely expanding to include opticianry, aspirationally? That would then help determine if we need to update this or not.
Well, so currently, I believe to be an SLD, you would have first taken the ABO exam, so the American Board of Opticianry exam, to become registered. If staff can confirm that.
Is correct.
We should likely add optometric and opticianry services.
So I would like to clarify specifically, we don't administer the exam. What this is talking about, the California laws and regulations and exam, is something we work with DCA to administer ourselves. So adding the ABO exam would be equivalent to talking about the NBEO exam. And we don't have control over that. So right now, we don't have a law exam for opticians, like we do have for optometry. So just keep that in mind.
So this is only referring to the California law and regulation examination that's administered to optometric licensees or potential licensees.
Correct.
So we can't put opticianry in there at this point.
Moderator, whether we do or don't mention opticianry under this statement
Mm-hmm.
will not preclude this board in the future to consider examination of opticians. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we can still work on it in the next 4 years and still consider it. And I think it may be a objective or a task or something like that later on. So I'm not sure we need to spend too much time on this unless the board member want to.
Okay, so it looks like we're fine to move forward to the next goal area, which is law and regulation. I'll give you a moment to look at this and let me know if it looks good to you as it is.
Should we mention something at the end, cost-effective practices for optometry and opticianry? Because we're doing laws for both at this point.
Doesn't practices just encompass both? Do we have to delineate opticianry versus optometry?
I don't know.
I think it's good the way it is.
I think so too.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move forward to the next goal area then. So I'll give you a moment to look at this.
So here we should add opticianry for optometric services, optometric and opticianry services.
Yep.
And practice of
then-
optometry and opticianry in California.
Perfect.
Okay, so does that look better?
Moderator, do we want to open these last few slides up for public comment, if there is any?
Sure, we can do that. Let me go ahead and open the Q&A panel. All right, the Q&A panel is now available. If you would like to make public comment, please type. I would like to make a comment in the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference, and if you do not see the Q&A panel, click on the question mark within a box at the bottom middle of your screen. All right, so we have Adam Bentley would like to make a comment. So Adam, you've been unmuted.
Thanks. Would you mind going back to the first goal area, this first slide? I had a comment. I'm trying to know if I remember what it was.
Adam, if you can't remember, that's okay. We'll open up the floor for public comment at the end of all these anyway. We can always go back.
Okay. Yeah, I'll save it for the end then.
Okay,
Apologies.
no problem.
All right, sounds good. And I am seeing no additional requests for public comment, so we'll go ahead and close the Q&A for now. Okay. So if we'll go back to after law and regulation, then the next one after law and regulation. So we have enforcement, and we made that change. So we'll go ahead to the next one.
Can we go back to enforcement?
Of course, yes.
So if somebody could take a look at the correctness of having optometric and opticianry twice in that statement. I don't know that we're going to have it that way. So if somebody would just take a look to make sure it's as grammatically short as it needs to be.
That sounds like a good idea. We don't have to do that here, I don't think, right?
Right, right. I'm not saying to do it right now. I'm just saying if somebody could just take a look at that.
Yeah. Our solid folks will do that for us.
Excellent. As will staff. I apologize. Just needed to unmute myself.
Sure. So what we craft today will be a draft, though there will be back and forth between Solid and the board before it is a final thing for you to vote upon. So we'll go ahead and move forward to the next goal area. Give you a moment to look at that. So would anyone like to add anything to this one?
We must add opticianry to this as well.
Sure.
About the practice of optometry and opticianry.
Okay.
And the laws and regulations which govern them.
Thank you.
And maybe now we do use practices instead of practice.
Okay.
Solid folks, if you could check on the grammatical use of the word which at the end, I think it's that, but
Okay.
check on that.
We can definitely research that and make sure that it's correct. Thank you. So we'll go ahead to the next goal area. All right, so this is the last one, organizational effectiveness, otherwise known as administration. Are we good with this, or would someone like to propose any changes? Okay, I'll take that as we're good. And then, Mr. Board President, do you want me to open up for public comment at this time, or?
Yes, please. That's right. I'd promised that. So why don't we do that?
Okay, we'll do that. All right, so the question and answer panel is now available. If you would like to make public comment, please type, I would like to make a comment, and submit it to all panelists. We are posting instructions for your reference. We'll give you a moment. Okay, this is the moderator. I'm seeing no request for public comments, so I will go ahead and close the Q&A panel.
Are you sure? I just saw one pop up.
I may have missed one. Oh, yes, sorry. It's so little real estate on my screen here. Sorry about that. So Adam, I have unmuted you.
Thanks. So one of my questions was around the licensing, because I know we had examination, apology, goal 2 examination. So we had questions around like the ABO exam, but that's more of like an educational requirement. Do we have like a goal or a section that talks about like educational requirements to gain licensure? Or would that, because I mean, that would cover what would be required of like to become an optician, the ABO exam, like what are the requirements that we hold our licensees or registrants to obtain?
I think to answer your question, we have to go back to the slide that talks about licensing.
So would that fall under maintaining licensing and registration?
I think that it would, Member Sharmurphy here. And I think that Adam's getting to, I think what's going to be a big part of his comment as we get to putting together those objectives is really understanding what other jurisdictions do in order to certify the continued education and the maintenance of education and skill among the workforce.
So I'm going to throw a question back out if Adam is still on. So do you feel that the definition of licensing and registration is encompassing enough for our work forward items for the DOC?
I feel like it's fine like as it is, but if there is an opportunity, I would almost be interested in, can we bake in like what requirements does it take to become an optician? But I guess it's not really, that would be more like rules and regulations versus goals. I'm just thinking back to slide, or the goal 2 is just like examination. If there's any way that we could speak to like educational requirements, but I guess that would be more regulatory than must be a goal.
Well, currently it would still be under licensing and registration.
Okay.
So the key, I think, is in the wording of licensing and registration. It talks about obtaining as well as maintaining licensing and registration. So I believe that what you're alluding to would fall under that part of the statement, obtaining and maintaining licensing and registration.
Okay, agreed. Thanks.
All right, so I'm not seeing any additional requests for public comment, so shall I go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'll do that. Okay. So as you head into the objective brainstorming process, you have some tools that you can draw from. One of them being the objectives worksheet, where we have a formula for creating objectives. And the last page of that also has action verbs, because we like to start our objectives with an action verb. You have your 2020 environmental scan, which identifies strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats that you may want to consider when crafting your objectives. You have your old strategic plan, because it's not cheating to carry forward an objective from your old plan if you feel it hasn't been accomplished or you wish to do that. So please feel free to do that. You have the goals with the statement. So that's what we just looked at, the licensing, the definition, the enforcement, the definition. And then, of course, your mission, vision, and values, which are also within your old strategic plan. So those are your resources. Next slide, please. So the strategic direction of the board is resting in the hands of those participating in the meeting today, but at the end of the day, the executive officer and staff will be the ones implementing it. So we just ask that you consider their limited time and resources, and of course, consumer protection is the board's mandate. Next slide, please. So we do ask that when you create the objectives, we try to make them SMART objectives. For example, if someone had a goal of being nicer, it's not very specific. How do you measure nicer? Is it action-oriented? Maybe realistic? Possibly time-based, not so much. But if someone makes a goal of, I'm going to smile at and greet 2 people a day, that's very specific. 2 people smiling a day, measurable. Yep, 2 people a day, action-oriented. You're smiling, you're greeting, realistic. Yeah, I think we could all handle smiling at and greeting 2 people a day and time-based because it's a day. So that is totally simplistic, but I just wanted to throw that out there as our idea of a SMART objective. Next slide, please. So here's our objective formula. We start with an action, we have the goal or the issue, and then we give the benefit or the why. So in this first instance, the action is we're creating an expert witness manual for subject matter experts with the goal or the benefit of to increase effectiveness of reports. So this is the objective formula we'll be using. And then next slide, please. So our first area is licensing, and as a rule, we encourage you to come up with 3 to 6 objectives per goal area. Certainly you can do more than that, but generally it's good to aim for 3 to 6. And do we want to just start throwing out our ideas for objectives, or did people want a little bit of time to look at the environmental scan?
Moderator, I don't know how you've done it with other boards, but just as an idea for discussion, what do you think about the idea of looking at our prior goals and objectives, particularly the progress report that staff has created for us on our past licensing and other objectives, and going through that and possibly modifying them, informed by the environmental scan and other thoughts that folks have. Is that how other boards have done it, or has any other board done it that way?
Not that specific way exactly, but they have definitely referred back to the old strategic plan per goal area and carried forth any objectives they felt had not yet been accomplished. So you're welcome to take that approach to it. That's perfectly fine. And so if you'd like to do that, we can just go forward to the place where we start typing, and you can all look at that progress report and your old strategic plan, and feel free to let us know what objectives you would like to carry forward.
Why don't I start with that just to get the discussion started, and folks can chime in and give other suggestions. But I just start with in the progress report, objective 1.1. It was streamline initial license process and renewal process, including paperless options and synchronizing multiple license renewal dates to improve staff efficiency and license compliance. That was completed because of Breeze, but I think we should put in a objective that we, to put it in lay language, keep an eye on that process and make sure that it's the Breeze process, to make sure that it continues to be streamlined and it continues to improve staff efficiency and licensing compliance. So that's the substantive thought. I'm not sure how we express it as an objective, but we've completed this, but we shouldn't just kind of forget about it. We should make sure it continues to function properly. So the benefit is to improve, to maintain or to improve staff efficiency and licensing compliance, because that is continuing to a goal, an objective we want to keep an eye on.
Okay. So as you were talking, my co-facilitator, Shelley, has been typing. So if you want to take a look at what she typed and let us know if that captures what you were thinking.
Yeah, that works.
Can we add licensing and registration compliance since we need to consider?
So,
right.
Adam or anyone in the public want to comment on this continuing education objective?
So Adam would like to comment. So Adam, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I think one opportunity we have there is whenever we're looking at registration with opticians, they have to take the ABO certification exam, but we don't actually, as a state, have a requirement to keep that active. So you don't have to keep an active certification. We have to keep an active we have to keep an active registration. So there is an opportunity there to, if we want to review educational requirements, it could be ongoing education, looking at CEs and continuing education for opticians as a strategic goal. So I think revisiting that would be worth it. And I think what the way that we'll look at it is keeping active ABO certifications as part of a registration requirement.
So what I'm hearing is a little bit different from the way the current objective is stated, because the current objective talks about continuing education requirements. And from what I heard from Adam just now is not continuing education requirements, but registration requirements. Is that the distinction, Adam, that you're making?
So, sorry, apologies. I'll say it again. So for the ABO exams, we have to take the ABO exam to become a registrant, but the ABO exam, we don't require that because it's a certification. We don't require that certification to remain active after registration. Right. So whenever we look at continuing education, it would be a requirement for opticians to keep a current ABO certification. Don't let that lapse. Do the continuing education that's required to keep a current active ABO registration or certification.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I think the language of old objective 1.2 encompasses what you've said.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Moderator, doesn't look like we have any other public comments. I get the sense from our DO rep and the pulse of the board is that we can probably copy objective 1.2 from our prior strategic plan.
Okay. So we'll just make a note to copy 1.2 from the prior plan.
Objective 1.3 from the progress report is continue monitoring and exploring opportunities to enhance breeze utilization, to increase staff productivity and promote licensee compliance with continuing education requirements. And it says it's completed December 2017. I have no feeling about this one way or another. Does anyone else have any comments, or staff have any comments about that? Is it something we need to do still, or?
I think that's something we still need to do, because I thought we had talked about trying to use Breeze as a way to monitor continuing education for at least the optometrists, so that when staff renewed licenses, they could go to Breeze and see if each doctor had completed their 50 hours of CE before their, or however many hours of CE that they needed before their licenses were renewed. But it was my understanding that Breeze was not capable of that right now, but that was one of the things that we were trying to see if we could sync like the classes and have people register for or go to their classes and then have it show up in Breeze somehow. So that it would just make it a lot easier for staff when license renewals were up.
Yeah, I think that we need to keep that one because it allows us, as Breeze continues to change, if we have desires to make changes, it makes sense with that one.
I agree. And we were talking about it because I think none of the other none of the other state boards have this capability also. And we were talking that we could be one of the first to either have it or introduce it.
Okay. Shar, do you have any feeling about that? It seems like a monitoring kind of item.
I think that the initials make sense. As staff and I are sort of back channeling, we're also thinking that it might be a good idea to put together a work group that would further review these before we come to the board in October, which is our anticipated adoption date. And I think that there can also be some additional sort of work by staff in order to, I think, evolve these that we're copying. What can we really pinpoint so as to make these even more actionable?
This is the moderator, and so Shar, what you just described is that would be an excellent action item. So when we do the action planning, like forming that task group, that would be a great action step.
Fantastic. Okay, so those are the objectives from our last strategic plan. Sid, I think you had a suggestion as to add something new.
Just based on looking at the results from the survey,
Oh, good point.
there's an emphasis on service and a lot of comments as an area and opportunity for development. So perhaps, and I'm not wedded to these, something like deliver service excellence that exceeds applicant and licensee expectations and safely expedites market entry. We heard from a number of board members as well as public members, not literally representing the public, but from various institutions and the like, as well as practicing or soon to be practicing optometrists and opticians that were fairly slow in turning around the applications. In addition, there were just general comments, and I can post these if you would like solid so you don't have to worry about typing everything. But it just seems to me that we've been hearing it for a number of years now. We might want to put it somehow into our objectives. And I'm not saying sacrifice any of the others, just think through what this is. So deliver service excellence that exceeds applicant and licensee expectations and safely expedites market entry.
I like that. I would only add licensing and registration. So add the word and registration.
So deliver.
That's to the title, licensing and registration.
Okay. Right, we'll be changing that to licensing and registration. So the issue, we want to deliver service excellence that exceeds applicant and licensee. Would applicant refer to registration? So that exceeds applicant and licensee expectations?
We were addressing licensees and applicants, or applicants and licensees were called out separately in the survey results.
Okay.
And then I think it covers opticianry as well as optometry.
Okay. And so the benefit is to improve application turnaround time and
safely expedite market entry.
Okay. And so the only thing we're missing now is our action verb. So maybe just put deliver and then
deliver, and the issue is service excellence.
Exactly. Yep.
So okay. I think my comment still stands, which is, so the issue is service excellence that exceeds applicant, comma, licensee, and registrant. Registrant, yeah.
Expectations. Okay. How's that look?
That's good.
Okay. Thank you.
Moderator, when you start working on actual wordsmithing, think about whether or not there's a term, a word that encompasses both licensee and registrant. out there. I don't know what it is, but you know, it's the people we regulate. Whether that's a one-word phrase that we can use.
Okay.
I'm sure other boards have a bunch of people that they regulate, and they don't put in pharmacists, pharmacy techs, pharmacy blah blah blah, and you know, pharmacy mop pushers. There must be one word that they can use. So
Sure.
Anyway, go back and think about that.
Okay.
Do we have any other additional possible objectives to suggest for licensing and registration?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
So my suggestion is around NBEO. So regularly review NBEO process and data to ensure quality of applicants is conducted fairly, hold on, and consistently.
Glenn, would that fall under licensing or examination?
It would not fall under examination because examination is just about the California law exemptions.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Let me ask a question on this. With the NBEO, I recall at some point a few years ago we were looking at the NBEO examination, and didn't that require an expenditure of resources and I think it was somebody from Solid had to review something with the NBEO, and it was a long, drawn out and fairly costly process. Am I remembering that correctly?
I think you're talking about the overall, what was it called, Shara? The assessment that we were doing, which is different than what I'm describing.
With each occupational analysis, we also do a linkage study to ensure that the NBO examinations correspond with what is identified as the specifics of the profession within California. We did just complete the occupational analysis last year. Linkage study is also just completed. I think that where we attack this is really making sure that we have funding to do the every 5-year occupational analysis and linkage study with best practice. That is not currently the case. We are still fighting to get funding to do our exam creation workshops. So I think that attacking that, making sure that we have the funding, maybe securing funding for regular interval optometry occupational analysis and national exam linkage studies to ensure the efficacy of the testing structure in place for optometrists. Long and winded.
So should this maybe be changed to, and some is ensure one of the action words? Ensure whatever would be the right action word, that we have sufficient funding for that? And could that be the action plan?
So let me take another stab at it. So ensure adequate funding to allow for regular occupational analysis of NBEO exam and processes. I just lost my train of thought, sorry.
Perfect time for me to chime in then, if I might. So we want to make sure that it's not just the analysis of the NBO, or the occupational analysis, it's the linkage study that's done with that information we gathered during the occupational analysis.
There you go. What Glenn said.
Maybe Glenn, go back to your original, it'll trigger it. Because you had some good words in the original.
I'll read to everybody my original. Okay, hold on, let me get back to it. Regularly review NBEO process and data to ensure quality of applicants is conducted fairly and consistently.
So do we just need to add occupational analysis and linkage studies?
Sarah, is that right?
I'm not sure if that would be the suggested edit to the issue that is typed on the screen. I'm not sure if that completely gets Dr. Kawaguchi's observation. So I think I want to make sure that he is comfortable with that language and whether or not it encompasses what his original thought was.
So we just have to add the benefit at this point. So the benefit is to ensure a fair and consistent process for applicants.
Might I suggest the action word secure rather than ensure?
It's secure. Don't use ensure.
Adequate funding to ensure.
Secure a fair and consistent process for applicants and ensure that consumers
Have highest quality of care.
yes, that's good.
Good job, Glenn.
I might have to repeat it so that it gets captured.
Right. So was that and ensure consumers get the highest quality of care? Or
Correct. Yes. Or
okay.
something.
Receive the highest quality of care. And thank you, Shar, for providing secure. In previous strategic planning sessions, sometimes the word ensure can cause legal counsel to get upset. So secure works very well. Thank you.
It could be to provide a fair and consistent process instead of assure there, or some other word.
Okay.
My
Even
mother-in-law drinks Ensure.
my condolences. That stuff tastes terrible.
I actually printed out the action verbs because I struggle with coming up with the action verbs.
Okay. So any other objectives?
That's a good student.
Any other objectives, Deborah?
I wanted to question staff. What process or resources are in place to allow applicants to check the status of their application and what else is required in order to get their licensure? So are they just calling up the board and saying, hey, what else do I have left to do? What kind of notification is given to them? I'm just wondering, do we need a source that they can go to check the status of their application?
So currently, that of course is something that we'd love to have within Breeze, but it's not a capability. Currently, the only way to find the status of an application is to call or email. We try to adequately or appropriately set expectations with graduates, seeing that we do get this influx. Our normal processing times are 6 to 8 weeks. We do try to inform applicants that those registration times increase from 10 to 12 weeks. And so that's 10 to 12 weeks from completion of application. So NBEO scores were received, transcripts received, background check completed. And so at this point, we have simply the resource of our one licensing analyst who can say, this is where you are in the process. This is when I anticipate we will be able to give you additional information. We are required by statute at the 45-day period to send a or an application deficiency notice. And we do that. So at 45 days after the submission of a complete application, we let folks know that if you please make sure that you have your background check-in or any of the other things that are individually for CLRE completed. But unfortunately, it's simply the single resource of one who processes applications and therefore has the knowledge of where applications are within the process.
Is it realistic to put together any kind of a way that applicants can check without utilizing staff time and calling and speaking to one person is, I just don't know how realistic of an objective that would be. So I'm just kind of asking if there are any suggestions, or is this out of the scope of what we should be looking at right now?
Or is there any way we could do like a team, like have maybe two, because we all know that when graduation hits in May, staff is flooded with applications. So maybe in the future we start having like increasing licensing for when optometry schools are graduating, and then so you can have 2 or maybe 2.5, full-time people assigned to licensing during graduation, because especially if the head licensing person has to go on leave, like it happened this year, licensing just is kind of fell apart for a little while after COVID. But I think it would be nice to at least have 2 people licensing, and maybe they could maintain some kind of flow chart or spreadsheet or something so that people can at least log on and not have to reply to every single email.
Right, I'm just trying to think, is there any way to automate it?
Dr. Wong, you're inside my head completely. So, part of that increase or the review of staff processes that Natalia is currently doing is so that we can better streamline and document process for real what actually has to go into processing an optometry application. We've had manuals, but they haven't been complete and they haven't been adequate enough to train staff. And so Natalia is now working through the process, documenting that. Hopefully, Assembly Bill 896 will make its way to the governor's desk that will allow us to join our optometry and opticianry forces. And in that case, what we would have is a senior licensing analyst, and we would have 3 licensing management service technicians who would fit underneath. That's where we're getting, and what we'd hope to be able to do. Of course, unforeseen circumstances always, So, as I said, I can't speak highly enough of Natalia and the progress that she's made in streamlining and document staff processes. And then our intention is to do that, to reform our licensing unit so that we do have a lead analyst who checks to make sure that things are done correctly, and that we've got 3 staff members who understand the processes for all of our licensing requirements, and then is able to move completed applications up to that senior analyst. And if that senior analyst is out for a period of time, that we have a way to maybe do 2 checks.
Shara, I want to interrupt you. I want to interrupt you right now with a question for the moderator.
Yes.
In the process of the strategic planning process, do we need to drill down on the details of how we're going to implement various things? I think a lot of what we're talking about is covered by SID's delivering service excellence, and the devil, of course, is in the details. And ideas and task forces and evaluations and whatnot. So is there a later point or that we would drill down further?
Yes, that would be the action planning session. So once we have the board approval on the strategic plan, the next one of the next steps is an action planning session where we look at each objective and we come up with steps, or the board, the staff come up with steps to carry out the objective and assign staff members to each step. So that's where the details come in.
Okay, great. Because in the environmental scan, there are complaints about customer service and suggestions about providing CE and renewal reminders. Those are good ideas. Training for customer service is a good idea. I'm not sure. I think a lot of it is covered by the items that we have right here.
I would agree.
If I might, Mr. President, just because this is going to be such a huge part of what we are doing within the licensing unit over the next 2 years, I would actually really love to see an action that is a restructuring of the licensing unit staff to create redundancies and
to eliminate redundancies.
What was that?
You said to create redundancies. You meant eliminate redundancies.
No, I don't want to eliminate redundancies. I want folks who know. I want people who know the process. Yeah. Okay. And I feel like that is. I really would implore the board to look at making that one of your objectives, because I think that is a part of what has been so difficult for our board to fulfill the service excellence needs, but really streamline and make our processing something that doesn't continue to come up every single year, that we really do have to restructure our licensing unit staff in order to create backups and create more folks who understand the processes.
Moderator, did you get that?
Right.
I'm sorry. As you're typing, Sid has raised her hand.
That might fit better into organizational alignment. The very last one in organizational effectiveness versus putting it in with the service, because it covers the broader organization.
Okay.
That's possible. Sid, what I might suggest is, since we're discussing it now, we type it in as it's fresh in in our brains, in Shara's brain, and then we can move it around as necessary.
Correct. We can just copy and paste it later. We can even make a note to move it to organizational effectiveness.
As you're typing that, does anyone else have anything they want to add under licensing? We're spending a lot of time on licensing, but I think it's important because it's a lot of what we do, and if we screw up licensing, it's really bad for this board. All of us will lose our heads.
So this is the moderator, and so for the benefit, is this restructuring licensing unit staff, is this to streamline the licensing process? Is it to
Create
Wanted to avoid any deficits, right? So, I mean, currently, right now, we have one licensing person, and if that person is gone, then the licensing department is non-existent, and then everyone has to play catch up. So it's to actually create redundancies, to minimize.
To create redundancies, to minimize
or minimize
disruption in service?
Yes.
Or, okay, to minimize disruption in service. All right.
Okay, looks good. Anything else for licensing and registration?
Actually, the other benefit of looking at the unit staff is to increase the speed.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so increase, should we say turnaround time or processing time? Yeah, there you go.
There you go, yep.
Okay.
Or improve processing times.
Okay, so improve. Very nice. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Let's move on to the next one. And actually, as we're moving on, one thing I wanted to mention to the moderator, to the extent in your experience with work with other boards that other DCA boards are putting in objectives specific to the COVID crisis, please give us suggestions as to what other boards have done. I mean, this may pop up in the laws and regulation portion the most in my mind, but you know, we're going to be dealing with the COVID crisis for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So just kind of something to put in people's brains.
Okay.
Shall we move on to the next area, which is examination?
Or do we want to take public comment at this time? Just
let's take public comment. Yeah, let's take public comment.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and open up the Q&A portion in case anyone has public comment at this time. So if you'd like to make a comment, please type, I would like to make a comment, and submit it to all panelists. We have instructions for your reference posted on the slide. All right, so I am seeing no requests for public comment at this time, so we'll go ahead and close the Q&A panel then. All right, moving on to the next area. So
examination. So in an examination, a past objective was recruit more subject matter experts to create examination questions in order to strengthen the diversity of the test. The status is complete and ongoing. How do people feel about that? keep it, get rid of it? Sure, how are we with our expert pool?
Shar, this is Mark. Shar had to step away for a minute. Our expert pool, subject matter expert, is pretty strong. We have a very good response when we call for experts. In fact, we're going to be doing a workshop in about a month, and I anticipate strong responses for those.
Okay. In that case, I suggest we just stop this. I mean, it's certainly something that you'll be working on and monitoring, but I don't think it rises to the level of being part of our strategic plan. Unless someone else disagrees.
That's correct, because when we put that on, we were very short on subject matter experts at that time.
Okay. All right, objective 2.2 is analyze the examination requirements to evaluate for competency and the validity of the examination. This was completed in February of 2019. Is this something that needs to be renewed? Doesn't sound like it. Objective 2.3, create a budget change proposal to secure funds so that the board can perform an occupational analysis of the RDOs in order to check for validity of the examination. We did that, completed January of 2019. So do any of the board members have any goals or objectives for examination? Right now we have nothing.
There's one more. There's objective 2.4.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. I can't read. 2.4, consider the feasibility of developing a state law exam for opticians to verify their familiarity with California laws, and that is still in progress. So do we want to carry that over? And before answering that question, why don't we open it up for public comment in case our DOC representative wants to comment on this or any other examination objectives.
Okay, this is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. So if anyone would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment and submit it to all panelists. All right, so Adam, you've been unmuted.
Hi, no real comment. I think on 2.4 is, so I would love for you guys to consider, the board, please, if you'd consider keeping 2.4 and carrying that over, because it's definitely, I think, a first step in the direction that we're going, is really just looking at just like developing like a state law exam. I think is just a great start for us. So I think that'd be a great goal to continue.
Okay, thank you. Well, without objection, why don't we do that, carrying over 2.4. Do the board members have any other suggestions for objectives under our examination? So David, why don't you go next, followed by Sid?
I would, what I had written down here was research, my action verb, expanding testing of the CLRE to allow for retakes within a 3-month period versus the current 6-month period. It's one of the things that came up in the environmental scan that was an issue. So maybe not force somebody to wait 6 months if they don't pass the test, let them take it sooner.
David, we
Yep.
did there was a study, it's probably like 5 years ago, because I requested this. And because I had numerous people ask if we could have it be shorter than 6 months. And there's some kind of study that we had that basically said that there was only a very small percentage of people who didn't pass it, and that the expense to have another exam available that wouldn't have repeat questions from the one that the applicant would have taken would have been it was going to be too expensive. And then they also drew a correlation to the medical board also. So it looks like medical board, dental board, and optometry all only allow it every 6 months, but it was mostly because of cost. And I can't remember what study it was, but it's been researched already.
Okay.
But I mean, we can look at it again. I mean, I know I've had multiple people ask me if they can take it within less than 6 months, or they would prefer, but
So
I just know that
moderator,
there was a study.
moderator.
Okay, so if we
No, I
went
have a
through.
question. I have a question.
Oh, okay, yes, yes.
So, and looking at the environmental scan and in relation to this, it mentions examination weaknesses. It says stakeholders, board members, board staff say accessibility examination is a weakness, having to travel to remote places. Stakeholders cite the examination's relevancy. Do we have any idea on these weaknesses? Was this like one person made this comment on some of these things, or was it, do we have any idea how many people made such a comment?
Yes, if you get into, if you're looking at the larger, not the condensed, but the larger environmental scan, there's a part that says raw comments, and the comments are grouped into categories. So if the same comment was made multiple times, you'll see next to it in parentheses the number of people who made that comment.
Do you have the page that's on?
So I don't know if that was, if the remote part was from a long time ago or more recent. I know that people who had to take it during COVID were driving hours trying to find a test center. So there were some people who were saying that they were driving from the Bay Area down to LA trying to find a test center in order to take the CLRE, and that might be more applicable just to COVID right now. A lot of people were having issues with trying to find an open test center, so they were willing to drive really far just to take the CLRE.
I don't know. Going back to Mark's point with COVID, I mean, this unfortunately, this is not going to be the last pandemic, and there may be other things that pop up in the years to come. Is it worth researching something that, so the board has a fallback position if something does occur, that we make this, dependent upon the governor calling a statewide emergency or something on that order, where we have a fallback measure in there to allow people to take their examinations? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know. So there's a major earthquake and suddenly LA is not a functional place to take an exam. Can there be a fallback measure for that?
Well, I think right, Shara, it's I'm drawing a total blank on the name of it, but it's not as if the students are going to schools taking the CLRE, they're going to certain test centers. And if the
Right.
test centers are closed because the governor says it's closed, then there's really nothing that we can do. I mean, the same thing's applying to all students right now who are trying to get licensed and they have to fly to North Carolina to take part 3 of their boards.
Okay, I've got something on that one too then. Okay, so in that case,
Sorry,
I'll just
everyone.
withdraw my suggestion.
Sorry, we're just trying to reduce feedback so that when I am asked to comment that you don't get all of the excess points. So I just want to, and I apologize, I had to step away to try to get those, that what dictates our ability to provide more frequent testing is the ability to create exam questions. And so it means that we would need to enter into a larger contract with the Office of Professional Examination Services here in BCA. We would bring in optometrists for the workshops more often so that we had a larger bank of test questions with which to have the exam proctored by PSI more often than 6 months.
So what I suggest is before we add that particular item to the strategic plan, can you pull the report and send it over to David and he can take a look at it? Because I do recall this was discussed somewhere.
I want to say the report was either 4 or 5 years ago. It was a while ago. But I mean,
Well, you know what though, if we are in sync with the other boards, with medical, with dentistry, with other boards, I have no objection. Then if they're going through the exact same thing, then we should be in sync with them.
Okay.
We basically, I think the percentage was so low, it was basically, you just have to remember, you need to take, you have to study for the test. Don't take it lightly. And so that's what we're talking, that's what I tell the students, at least, that are graduating.
Okay.
So I apologize too. I wasn't here for all the discussion, so I'm not sure which report was referenced, but we are also within our outreach trying our best to get out to the schools and let them know that students in their third year should be taking their law and regulations exam, giving themselves enough time to do a retake fourth year, so as to not be after graduation without a successful passage of the law and regulations exam. So we were also trying to sort of better set expectations for graduates that it's necessary to start that testing sooner than many of them think is appropriate.
Okay. All right, thank you. We only have one examination objective. I don't want to make up things. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot Sid. Sid?
Reimagine examination processes to reflect the state's high-quality eye care standards and the evolution of test taking at eye care, health, and educational institutions.
Sid, I think I understand what you mean, but can you like tell me the specific problems or issues that you're imagining or you're seeing or considering?
I'm thinking back to the discussions that we've had with some schools, and relative to the way tests are taken, I'm thinking back to how we've talked about certain tests are out of sync with today's practices, and how we need to get on the leading edge here.
Sounds great. Moderator, did you get all that, or need Sid to read it over to you again, or send it to you later?
Yeah, I just ping it. Why don't, it's just easier to ping it if there's a place to ping it.
Well, we can open up the chat feature if you want to just type it there.
Hey, Sid, I have a clarifying question as well. So when you're talking about reimagining, are you talking specifically about the law exam? Are you encompassing more than the law exam?
Sorry, that's where the subtask would define. So if we want the subtask, an action item to be specific to a law exam or specific to part 2 or whatever it may be. But I've just heard from those on the board enough, as well as public comment, that some of the testing is a little out of touch. And so we might want to, and for example, the locations and where to go. And in one exam is only offered over here versus over there. So it's however we want to frame it. That's why I was using a big word like reimagine, because then when you get into the tactics, you get more specific what you want to accomplish. Could be a totally different word. Could be, throw it out even.
Yeah, so your eloquent statement may be better served under licensing and registration, so that we have, if we reimagine, it could be broader than just the law exam. Because if we put it in this section, we're only really referring to the law exam. So how do you feel about us having that statement in the license? I know that doesn't help what Mark asked for, which is having something else possibly in this section, but I think the way that you stated your ultimate benefit that you're looking for, there's a possibility that it's better served under a broader section like licensing and registration.
I'll let Solid even consider, and we can all look at it once we have everything in all the places.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thought I heard the board beyond law exam that there were some other challenges that we're having.
Yeah, I'm not sure at this point. I consider this goal to be limited to just the California law and regulation exam.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to.
This is a wide net.
Why everyone has to go to North Carolina? I think we should continue to discuss that.
So I'll
Okay.
throw out a separate thing to back up to our broader categories. Another possibility that we may want to consider is broadening this subject examination to not just be referring to the California law exam and maybe encompass more under the examination section.
This is the moderator. So would you like us to go back to the goal and then the statement underneath the goal so we can broaden the statement?
I would, so that's what my suggestion is, but I'm just deferring
Okay.
to my fellow board members on
Okay.
whether or not they feel that that's appropriate based on the importance and also the issues we have been hearing around not just our California law exam process, but also the National Board of Examiners in Optometry, as well as some points that Adam brought up around potential, ABO. There's a test for that. I'm just questioning whether or not we need to expand that category now.
Can we switch a few words around? Because when I read it first, I thought exam process was not limited to the California exam. If we were to, I don't know, to switch, this is where the board works to provide a fair, valid, legally defensible exam process and licensing the exam. So exam process feels broader to me and can include every element of our every element of examinations related to the licensing, to every element related to licensing.
All right. So does that look better? And does optometric services, is that's going to include the opticians as well, or do we need to do something there?
So we do need to add an optician.
Yeah, that's Dave. On exam process, the exam process with the NBEO California doesn't have anything to do with that. All we can really do is that's part of the licensing process, but not the examination process. We can't have an input as to what the NBEO does. I mean, we can have an input, but it won't necessarily make any difference.
Well, we
Okay.
have
There was a
in the
time
parts
back
that
in the
we
day
accept.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so we do have some input in the parts of the NBEO that we accept. Like as of right now, we don't accept their injection section. We're requiring that, so we're not accepting the entire NBEO exam. We're kind of picking and choosing the parts that we accept.
But is it a defensible exam process? Because we're not the ones that are saying, okay, you got to go to North Carolina for the exam. That's part of the process. It's just something that's not within our ability to regulate where that exam is taken. And way back when I took this exam, the exams were done at the optometry schools. Everything was done was done at your school.
Mm-hmm.
So it was completely run by the NBEO ran its part at the school, and then the state ran its part at the school.
So wouldn't we want to think about influencing that, to Dr. Wong's point, particularly given the current conditions we're in our economy?
So we are
NBEO has had a statement on that they provided us, and that's part of their presentation, that they can't guarantee the security and the the validity of the testing if it's not done at their approved testing center.
Right. So, but we're also talking with the NBEO, trying to come up with a second test location that would be west of the Mississippi. So that is one thing that we are currently looking at, but it would be in the future. So that way, for those people or those schools that are west of the Mississippi, there would be a closer location. But there's a lot of restrictions for a second location. But that's currently under discussion.
Is there another verb we can use to fix this instead of the board works to provide a fair, valid, and legally defensible exam process? Maybe if we change the word provide to something else so it doesn't signify that we are providing the exam.
Promote.
Secure, promote. Oh, I like promote.
Promote's good.
Okay, so the board, could you just say the board promotes, or works to promote a fair, valid, and legally defensible exam process?
I see people nodding their head.
Okay.
Any objections?
So, and then do we also have to say that at the end, competent individuals are licensed or registered to provide optometric and opticianry services? Or are we just, because now we're not talking just about the CLRE anymore, correct?
Correct. I like that ad too.
So licensed or registered to provide optometric or opticianry services in California.
Okay, with those changes, do we need to change any of the objectives or add any objectives for examination?
Yes, so we need to move SIDS Reimagine up to that section.
No, it stays in the section, doesn't it?
It stays in the section because we already started moving it, yes.
Right.
But it would go there.
Okay, great.
And then, Sid, do you want to repeat what you had said, or I also opened up the chat if you wanted to type it in.
Let me open the chat. One moment, please, and I'll pop it right.
Okay.
As she's doing that, I'm assuming that's the last addition to examination from the board? Okay. And we've already taken public comment on examination. Am I correct?
We did open it up earlier, yes.
Okay.
All right. And that comment was sent to everyone. So if we can just give a moment for the moderator to copy that so we make sure.
Well, while we're doing that, because we're talking about opticians, let's open it up one last time for the public comment on this in case the DOC representative wants to make a comment.
Okay. All right. So we've opened up the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists. And we are displaying instructions for your reference. If you don't see the Q&A panel, click on the question mark within a square at the bottom middle of your screen.
Okay, so doesn't look like anybody wants to make a comment. Can we go back to the screen where Sid's language is typed in, or where you've typed in Sid's language?
Sure. So that is in the chat. If you click on the speech bubble at the bottom middle of your screen, you can see what she typed, and then I'd like to get it on the screen as well so the public can see that. And then we want to so basically reimagine the examination processes, and then the benefit would be to reflect the state's high quality eye care standards and the evolution of test taking at eye care, health, and educational institutions.
So do any board members have any additional comments on this language? Seeing none, let's move on. That's great. I don't think we have any other examination suggestions either, so we can go to modern regulation.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
we had previously discussed doing lunch at 1:30. Would it make sense to do that now as we are at a clear break within the objective or goals?
That sounds great. How long are we allocating for lunch?
We were hoping 45 minutes.
45 minutes is fine. So that's 1:15 or 1:10.
If we were to come back at 2:15, I think that could.
Oh yeah, 2:15. I'm sorry.
If that works for the board.
Seeing no objection, let's do that.
Okay, so just checking, we're coming back at 1:15?
2:15, I'm sorry.
2:15, yes, 2:15. Okay, thank you. And just a note to everyone, make sure you mute your microphone. So you don't need to sign out, but just mute your microphone. Thank you.